Hello and welcome. This is Michael Beach, and you are dialed into the What Are You Doing podcast. This is the show for thought leaders who are investing in the next generation of leadership for their organization. This is also the show for emerging leaders who want to become that next generation of great leadership. Together, we are developing leaders who will, in turn, develop many more leaders and make a difference. All of us at Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting are excited to be able to bring you another What Are You Doing podcast episode today. We're very fortunate to be able to do what we do for a living and get a chance to contribute to the success of forward-thinking, fast-growth companies and help them in their journey to grow into great companies with great culture. We're especially excited today because we've got the opportunity to introduce you to a very good friend of mine and an award-winning business leader, Jeffrey Rogers, the founder and chief executive officer, president of Jeffrey A. Rogers Executive Business Coaching in Syracuse, New York. I've had the opportunity and pleasure of knowing Jeff and working with him now over the last several years. Jeff is an accomplished executive business coach. He's an entrepreneur. He's a professional trainer who has really, truly distinguished himself by the amazing results that he achieves in building and empowering successful business leaders and their emerging leaders. Jeff travels the world to introduce the prospect of entrepreneurship to veterans who are about to separate from the military service and are looking to start their own businesses. Jeff also led an initiative to develop family businesses in upstate New York in the last few years. As if that wasn't enough, Jeff is giving back to the local community in Syracuse by passing his knowledge to the next generation of business leaders as an award-winning adjunct professor at Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management, Entrepreneurship, and Emerging Enterprise. I could go on, but you get the idea. This is a man of substance. This is a man on a mission, and he is up to his neck in making the world a much better place for many people. Jeff, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, my friend. I've been looking forward to having you on as a guest for a long time, and today is the day. I can't wait to get started with our interview. Welcome.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much. That was quite the introduction. I was pretty curious to meet this fellow myself. That was pretty fun to hear your phrases there all put together and strung through. So thank you so much for having me. I'll tell you what, in our work together the past few years, it was really nice to get to know you and to be able to call you my friend. So it's great to be on your show today, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So thanks for having me, pal.
Oh, my pleasure. Trust me, it's going to be all good for me and our listeners. Well, Jeff, start us off. I'd love to hear you give our listeners a little bit of background on your group coaching programs. You've got an Elite Owner Executive Development Series and a Founders 212 Series group coaching program that are a big hit in upstate New York. Could you give us a little bit of insight into what your group coaching programs are all about?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Mike, the Elite Series really started with the idea as I was coaching my individual clients, executives, leaders, business owners. I started to find common themes that they were all struggling with. Mm-hmm. And as I started to pay more attention and be able to identify these themes across the board, I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to put something together that would allow them to know and understand, one, they're not alone in dealing with these particular challenges, right? And they're ranging, they're across the board, everything from culture to self-awareness to self-confidence to business structure systems. You get the idea, all those things. And so I put together a program, and I started out with an Elite 1.0, and then that led to 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0. And as I outlined the program, and each time they said, hey, what's next? What's next? And we just kind of worked our way through that. And the success was unbelievable, watching these individuals grow. And now I have 4 of these series in operation, and many of the people that are in the subsequent runnings of those individual series, and they get better each time. You learn as you grow, and you grow as you learn, and that continues into the process. So the numbers of their team leaders and executives in the series proves to me that they're getting the value. And that kind of, yeah, and the funny thing was 212 really developed at the end of the Elite Owner Executive Development Series. And they said, hey, what's next? What's 5.0? And there wasn't a 5.0. The series ends with, and now I introduce to you my very best self. Where do you go from there? You know what I mean? Like, that's the end of it. Right. But they still wanted to stay together in this cohort type thought. And so that's where Founders 212 came from. The idea is that, water boils at 211 degrees.
Okay.
Now that we have all these fundamental thoughts and ideas, to maintain that boiling point, that 212th degree, that one extra degree, it's easy to forget those things. It's easy to get dragged back into the quagmire of day-to-day operations and all the challenges. So the 212 was designed to keep that 1 degree, that fuel that fire, to keep that elevation and keep you on point. And it's been great. And that's the place where all the people who want to end up and continue their journey with Jeff Rogers and all the things that we do together, that's where we end up in the Founders 212.
Marvelous. I was going to ask you if the 212 was significant, and you anticipated that and answered it for me. Thank you so much for that. Well, you and I have had the pleasure of traveling to the same events from time to time because we both do similar work. And I know because of some of the things you've done on some of those trips that you are quite a music aficionado. You are a buff. So one of the things I like to talk about with my guests is about their musical interests. What would you say is your favorite musical artist or perhaps your favorite band? Do you have one?
That's a great question. You know what I found is over time, it's changed, right? Okay. So as a young man, and now being a little bit older, I've watched those tastes change. So I'm a big Lou Reed fan, right? Lou Reed went to school at Syracuse. I didn't know that till a little bit later on. He was a little bit edgy, and he's always made me think. And I just love the way he kind of phrases things and puts things together. And then, the Rolling Stones, that whole classic vibe, and the Who and all that. That's what I grew up with. And I love those messages. But lately I've been kind of in the John Prine, Jimmy Buffett, when we've traveled together, the fall, October concert for Buffett is always that same weekend, and haven't missed it. Right. Those are fun things. I love those messages. I'm a positive guy. So those upbeat messages are, kind of fun.
Yeah. Very fun. That's fantastic. Well, I will tell you, my wife is a big Rolling Stones fan. And she's also a big John Prine fan. So I talked her into going to a Jimmy Buffett concert with me just a few years back, and we had a blast. Got to see the Eagles and Jimmy Buffett one night outdoors in the summertime. That was a fun show. Well, what would you say is the best concert you've ever seen, Jeff? Is there one that stands out for you?
Oddly enough, the Bare Naked Ladies in an outdoor small arena. It was really good. They're another one of my favorites.
Fantastic.
I like their message. And I wasn't planning on that, and that's probably what made it the best.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm curious, at what point in your life, at what point in your career did you kind of become aware that you were interested in leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. Early on, I started my very first business, and that business went for 33 years. And I started it when I was in college. And I think right from that point, I learned that I needed to be a leader, right? As you start something at a young age, I was 19 years old. And I didn't do it, small style. We got a tax number and the insurance policy and started legitimately.
Yeah.
And what I found in that process was leadership kind of finds me. I don't know. And I don't want that to sound not the way I intend it to be heard. It's one of those things that, from a natural standpoint, I do. So as a doer, when there's complacency and when there's idle time, leaders fill the gaps, right? So I kind of found myself, if I didn't like something, rather than complaining about it, I thought maybe to do something about that might be a better approach.
Sure.
And that kind of grew and led itself to me finding myself in places that I didn't intend to be, but naturally filled that gap. And that's what I've learned about my view on leadership. It's unintended, but it's natural.
And you've obviously got an affinity for it because you've certainly developed a large number of leaders over the years that you've been doing this. Did you have any leadership mentors along the way who made a big impression or a big investment in you?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. As I think about that, there's been so many people along the way, and I like to refer to them as intended and unintended, right? Mm-hmm. So oftentimes you identify someone that you are feeling that they're worthy of your investment, and you want to give to them maybe some things that you've learned along the way. And then there's those that just kind of, and I was always one of those people that just paid attention to other people. And, got the benefit of what their value was without even them knowing it, right? So that's the intended and unintended. But there was a professor in college that really challenged me to a level that in the moment, I really didn't appreciate him. But I think he really knew what he was doing. And later, upon my graduation, there was a moment where he kind of came up to me. And I'm kind of a bigger guy, and about 6'1", about 230, and he was a little guy with a brush top, haircut. Mm-hmm. And he stood up to me, squared right up, and said, "Rogers, you're all right." And that was the moment that I just kind of realized,
that's great.
Why did you do that to me, right? But he pushed me and challenged me, and boy, when I think of the person, it has to be him. And then there's been friends and other. I remember my very first major client, and he pulled me aside one day and just kind of shared with me that, I think you worry too much about finding new clients and not appreciating the ones that you already have. And that at the age of 21 was a profound moment. Yeah. And he didn't mean it in a challenging way. He meant it in a really good advisory way. So those little moments along the way, if you're smart enough to listen to them and learn from them, I think are the greatest value.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a really encouraging message to receive at the age of 21.
Sure was.
How cool. That's great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Jeff. So along the way, I have to believe that you've probably encountered an occasional business or leadership book from time to time. Were there any that had a profound effect on you? Maybe tell us the book that you put the most stock in or your favorite.
Yeah, Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team to me is really special. Mm-hmm. It's the idea that trust is everything, just as an alignment with my personal value system. So in understanding the 5 dysfunctions, right? Lack of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, lack of accountability, and inattention to results. When you string that together and really think about it and apply those principles, they can be applied to everything. Mm-hmm. So for me, I've really found great impact with that idea, and then translating that to my style and the value structure that I have and the goals that I'm looking to achieve. That's been a profound book for me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm struck by that book as being one of the best that's ever been put together as well. When I first started as a coach, one of the first things I did was I bought a courseware to be able to do a workshop in the 5 dysfunctions of the team, and spent a lot of time my first couple of years coaching with some of my first clients, delivering 1 or 2 day workshops where we rolled up our sleeves and figured out how to build great teams. It's meaningful work, and it's challenging, and it's fun, and it's encouraging, and all of the above. Great book. Wonderful stuff. Well, I would imagine that you probably invest in yourself from time to time to become a better leader. Can you share with our listening audience what you're doing to raise the level of your leadership game these days?
Yeah, I really believe that the trap is thinking that you know what you need to know to be successful. Mm-hmm. And to really exit the comfort zone. If you work with me, I really focus on the idea that there's a comfort zone. And I describe that as being that place where you're you're in your sweatpants, you're watching your favorite show, drinking your favorite adult beverage, and life is just plain good, right? And then there's the learning zone and the uncomfortable zone, and then the panic zone. And then there's that great space called the growth zone. And the fortunate or unfortunate thing, no matter how you look at it, is that you have to go through all of those zones to earn growth. So to intentionally put myself in a learning environment in an uncomfortable position, and here's the trick to it in my mind, that is in alignment with your goals, is in alignment with where it is that you want to go, not just for the sake of putting yourself in an uncomfortable position. There's really no value in that. But if that takes you closer to where it is that you want to go, what you want to add value, whatever your thought is, then it's really worthwhile. And I really intentionally, and there's the other word, try to create environments that allow that to happen. And it's pretty funny when you start to do those things. I've noticed that the universe, however you want to look at that, starts to present opportunities that if you're looking for them, and here's the trick too, willing to do something, willing to take action, even if you don't know what that action is or should be, but something to get that ball rolling. It's amazing what can happen. So those are the fundamental philosophies and what I try to do on a daily basis to put myself into that next step. And it's uncomfortable sometimes. It's scary sometimes.
Sure. Fantastic, though, that you've made the choice to just rip off the bandage and embrace it and get outside of your comfort zone and do the work necessary to learn. That's tremendous. I like the idea that you made it a point to say what you do has to align with your goals, though. That's a big point, I think. Well, a very positive message. I'm a fan of mindsets as well. And I try to remind myself as often as I can that it's too easy to get into a negative mindset or a mindset that says we're screwed or we can't do it or we don't have what we need. You can't go down that path because then the playing field looks like one problem after another, when in fact, maybe it's one opportunity after another. Jeff, as you develop leaders in your work, have you come to some conclusions about some of the things that aspiring leaders might be able to do differently if they wanted to improve their leadership abilities?
Yeah, that's another good one. With working with business owners and executive leaders, one of the things that was interesting when I was asked to teach at Syracuse University in the entrepreneurship department, and I'm not an academic person by nature. In fact, I'm significantly dyslexic. So there was a hurdle there that I really was intimidated by, if I want to be honest with you. But again, putting yourself in that uncomfortable space to add value, it was in alignment with what I really wanted to do and give back. So in that space, I decided to take the coaching fundamentals into the classroom, and that's where the magic really happened. And a lot of people were kind of wondering, what are you doing in there? The results that you're getting are terrific, and they're really not conventional. And that was the whole idea in the first place. So I guess to put yourself in an environment that demands results, right? Fundamentally necessary. In the classroom, there's a syllabus. There's the X's and O's of what needs to be developed. But it's those gaps in between that, in my mind, are all the difference. So it was the idea of culture in my space that I need to add value. That culture, that environment, what we believe, I believe this, you believe this, what that common bond is culture to me. So I think a lot of times leaders think they need to be something they're not to be a leader. And what I found was, being a non-academic, I'm a professor of practice. How do you be a professor of practice? What are the expectations? And what I found was I just needed to be my very best self. And it took me about 3 weeks to figure that out. So I think leaders of today, leaders of tomorrow, need to maybe not focus so much on what they think they need to be, but more importantly, lean into what they are, who they are, the strengths that they possess. And that is really what I try, whether I'm traveling and working with our nation's veterans, whether I'm working in the classroom, or whether I'm working with a group, a leadership team, or an individual owner or executive. The message is all the same. There isn't a different message for different people. It all goes down to, how do you become the best that you are?
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I answered that question as I kind of was speaking.
You did.
I kind of got lost in my words, but
I thought that was a tremendous answer.
All right, good enough.
I took away a couple of really powerful thoughts. One, let's not overthink this. Let's not make it too complicated. And maybe 2 or 3 times more powerful, you're recommending to our audience that if you want to find out how you can maximize your value, be who you are. Figure out what your strengths are, leverage them, and go to work on becoming the best you that you can possibly be. That's a really great message. Great message. Well, we're going to take a short break here. We've got to take a pause and hear from our sponsors. We'll be back in just a second with Jeff Rogers. Hello, this is Michael Beach with Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting. I want to tell you today about lots of free things that we can provide for you at no cost that are going to be incredibly valuable. If you're an aspiring leader or you want to learn more about developing leadership within your organization, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We put blogs out monthly, posts out almost daily. We have a YouTube channel, Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting, that has a series of videos on leadership and accountability and many others. Of course, you can subscribe to this podcast. In addition, you can send us a message at info@michaelbeachcoach.com, and we'll be happy to sign you up for our monthly newsletter, where we always include free tools for everyone who signs up for the newsletter, and we tell you what's going on at our company. Again, this is Michael with michaelbeachcoach.com, and we are looking forward to you signing up and subscribing to our blog, our video, our podcast, or our newsletter. Thanks. All right, we are back. I'm here today at the What Are You Doing podcast with my good friend, Mr. Jeff Rogers, an outstanding executive business coach up in upstate New York, lives in the Syracuse area. And we've been having an excellent conversation today about the work that Jeff does with small businesses, family businesses, veterans. Man, he coaches a lot of folks in a lot of different scenarios, and he does a great job at all of it. Jeff, have you noticed any particular obstacles or barriers that some of the aspiring leaders and emerging leaders that you're working with start to get distracted by?
Yeah, another great question. I think that it goes back to maybe a fear, and I like to define fear as false expectations appearing real. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think there's this idea, this notion that to be a leader, you need to know everything. And there's almost this fear I see often. And I'm not even sure if it's young leaders. I think it's just in leadership itself, that maybe I don't know what others think I do know, and therefore I kind of have to fake it until I make it. And I hate that phrase, mm-hmm. because it goes back to, the point that we were talking previously about, which is you're there because you have a strength set that someone has identified as valuable. So wouldn't it be better to lean into the strengths that we have, because that's what people appreciate about us, and magnify that, force multiply that. That's a word I use a lot with my clients, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to elevate you, right? You're going to learn as you go. I don't know about you, and well, actually I do know about you, right? It's a continuous learning process. We're always trying to learn to gain value, right, so that we can share that. And that's what good leaders do. So to think that you need to know everything at whatever age to make the best decisions or to be the best leader, it's a process. It's not a destination.
Wonderful. What's the greatest leadership advice anybody's ever given you, Jeff?
I think it goes back to the idea of people need to know how much you care, not how much you know. Mm-hmm. There's a theme that's kind of being woven through our discussion here today. And I really think that at least from my standpoint, that to develop a culture, to have people follow you, even where and when there are times that they don't quite know where we're going. But it goes back to trust, and it goes back to knowing that you have their back. Sometimes I think leaders get a mistaken thought that people exist to serve them. And the fundamental principle that I work with, and I know you do too, is that we exist to serve the team, the organization, and together we'll all get there. And for me, that's really the important piece. And it goes down to trust, and it goes down to care. But there's a trap to that too, and that sometimes we can overuse those strengths and allow people to underperform. And then when we do that, we're really disrespecting unintentionally the people who are doing the work. So we need to be really mindful of that environment too. So empathetic leadership can sometimes go wrong when we don't keep perspective and our eye on the results.
Boy, that's so true. So very true. Well, that's great. I love the idea of servant leadership. And I know you and I probably have talked about this a number of times over the years. It's really important that a leader who really wants to become a good, influential, positive leader, you can't take the idea with you to the workplace day after day that people are working for you. The only way to make it work is you got to flip the org chart and put yourself at the bottom and say, the only reason I have a job is these 45 people that are above me on this org chart. I got to keep them all functioning and keep them all highly happy and productive, and then I'm doing my job. Interesting way of looking at things. Jeff, do you have a 60-second leadership lesson that you'd be willing to share with our listeners today?
You know, when I think of a quick 30-second piece, it's really to put others before yourself and understand that together you're going to get to where it is that you need to go. But you can't do that without clearly defined expectations and deliverables, a really clear vision as to where we're going so that they can wrap their brains and their energy into that thought, and then to understand why they're doing it. So to help people connect to their why, I think is a really essential piece. A good leader understands that, why the individual on the team is there, and helps better connect their why to the why of the organization. And I think that gets lost a lot. I don't think leaders put enough investment into understanding individual and team strengths. I know that was probably close to a minute, but understanding strengths, connecting to mission, applying those individual strengths to the team, to the unit, to the mission, providing the vision, and clearly defining the objectives is critical to success. And I think a lot of people do some of that, but not all of it, and certainly not all of it in the right order. And that's one of the missions that I'm on, is to help people find that clarity.
Amen. Wow. What a great 60-second leadership lesson. Listeners, I hope you were paying attention. You might want to go back and listen to that portion of today's episode again, because that was the good stuff. How much of a value do you place on emotional intelligence when you're recruiting or developing leaders, Jeff?
That's great. I'll share with you. In the last run of my Elite Owner Executive Development Series, we did a recap. And that was units 1 through 4. So these people have been with me for 3.5 years. They've been together for 3.5 years. The bonds and relationships were special. And one of the final thoughts in that series by one of the star individuals was, you know what? It all boils down to emotional intelligence, doesn't it? So that sums it up. Yes, it does. It all boils down to your ability to know what to pull out of the toolbox and when, and how to respond in the appropriate way. You know, I believe there's sometimes appropriate a moment to bang the fist. I believe that there's an appropriate moment to raise your voice. But you know what? Those are the few and far betweens. And I think far too often people allow their personal emotions to get in the way of really good leadership. So, yeah, emotional intelligence really is everything, certainly in building culture.
I don't know who actually said it, but it's a thing that you hear quoted and attributed to dozens of leaders over the centuries. Somebody said, culture beats strategy for breakfast. And, somebody else said for lunch, for dinner, what have you. I don't know who said it, but they were right. Culture is absolutely everything for an organization. With great culture in place, I think you can accomplish anything. Without great culture in place, I don't think you can accomplish much of anything. And your client who said it all really boils down to emotional intelligence was very wise indeed, because that situational appropriateness makes such a difference. I know you feel that way for sure, and I agree with you. Jeff, I'm pretty convinced that you're a terrific leader, and I would love to see you reveal for our listeners maybe the best single leadership development investment that you ever made in yourself. What was the best thing you did to help yourself on your journey?
This may sound somewhat biased, but coaching, right? To me, in whatever style that is, however you access that, but to have mentorship, structured mentorship, intentional mentorship is of high value. And the reason I believe that to be so true is, we fall into the trap of ourselves. And if left to our own devices, we're going to do what we do and think that that's the right thing to do. And by having that outside, unemotionally attached third party that has your back, that has your best interest in mind, and isn't afraid to kind of call out and say, hey, are you really thinking that that's going to get you to where it is that you said you wanted to go? Do you really think that might be the best way? Or might there be another idea that you could lean into to get there? And by having that healthy challenge, and I share it with my clients all the time, I'm not here to be your yes man. And if I feel that I'm not adding value, then it'll be time for us to part our ways. But we need to have that moment that we can have that honest discussion of, is this right for you? Because each of us are different. My ideas are not your ideas, and probably not someone else's ideas. But when you put it all together, it really has value. So for me, coaching has been that moment. I found my greatest growth in those spaces and continue to do so today.
That's fantastic. Now, how long ago was it when you first hired a coach to work with you?
It's got to be at least 11 years ago now.
And you just continue to stick with that. And you've had multiple coaches over the years, right?
I have. And the funny thing was, I was just writing a piece for the Founders 212 unit yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I found myself saying, and kind of a recap, but my first experience with that coach, and this was profound, this rocks me to this day, was the idea that, are you prepared that the strategy, systems, tactics, and processes that you use to find success to this point, and the people, may not be, and probably will not be, the processes, people, strategies, and tactics that are going to help you find success at the next level. And that really rocked me. And it was so profound. I mean, it sounds so simple, but when you really think about that, it brought tears to my eyes, because I couldn't understand how that could be so. And it really exposed for me an overused strength of loyalty. And I have to keep that in check to this day.
Sure.
So that very first volley, that very first challenge, to this day is something that I check with the decisions that I make. So it really, really profound. That's something so simple.
That's a powerful coaching moment right there. I think I know who that was that you were working with. I think you do too. He's a pretty terrific coach.
He's a pretty terrific coach.
Yeah. Awesome. Jeff, is there anything that you'd like to recommend to our audience today about investing in others so that they might be able to help people around them to become great leaders? Any words of advice?
Well, first of all, you have a battery of great questions here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of like you might know what you're doing, right? That's pretty funny.
Thank you. Nice.
Yeah, the idea of meeting people where they are. I find this especially in younger leaders too, right? And maybe that's not even fair. I think all leaders, now that I kind of think that through more, but the idea that we know where we want them to go, and maybe we're frustrated, so we're trying to help them or push them in a way that we think is healthy, but might not be healthy for them. So to meet people where they are, and certainly to be able to do that, you have to care, number one, right? So it goes back to that thought. But maybe you have to do some good investigation to figure out what it is that they bring to the table. So that whole idea of a strengths assessment, understanding why they do what they do, why should anybody care what they do? And do the strength sets that they currently possess, are they going to be the right strengths to get them to where they want to go? And if not, how can we then help them shore up those areas that need improvement? And more importantly, how can we force multiply and harness those strengths that they do have in the right direction and get them under control? And there is where emotional intelligence comes in. So when you place all that together, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you are putting on a clinic today, my friend. Thank you. Would love to hear your thoughts, Jeff, about teamwork and collaboration in the workplace. How have you developed strong teamwork and collaboration on the teams that the companies you're working with are putting together?
Yep. So I think I'm going to expand that answer just a second ago, right? Understanding strengths, connecting the why to the mission of the organization. Those are the fundamentals, I think, to get started there. But then I think you have to create a culture that allows for debate, healthy debate, structured debate. Creative abrasion is key. You can get to an answer pretty quickly, but it might not be the best answer. So to create teams that are designed to have creative abrasion, that are diverse by nature and accepting of each other, is, I think, the key to success. And, that's a really hard thing to do. There's a lot of area there for ego to be damaged, opinions to be thwarted, all those things.
Sure.
And it takes a very strong leader to put that together, to assemble that, to allow themselves to be challenged in ways that weak leaders might not allow themselves to be challenged, to get to the right conclusions, the right decisions, the right courses of action. That, to me, is the only way to do that. So teamwork, collaboration requires, and not this artificial harmony, right? Everybody get along to get along. Right. No. It's we have to kind of agree to go at it, but with respect and candor. And that is the secret sauce. And when that's added to the equation, and no tolerance for otherwise. And the other thing, and I might be going a little long on this one, but I think it's so important, the idea that we don't tolerate square pegs and round holes. Because when we do tolerate as leaders poor performance or behavior that is contradictory to the culture or the rules that we have agreed upon, what we say to the rest of the people in the team, in the organization, in that particular group, is that we don't respect what they're doing by following the guidelines and implementing to the best of their ability. And that creates havoc beyond belief. And then we wonder why the organization doesn't function the way we want it to. Oftentimes it could come back to ourselves. I'm really aware of it.
Wow. That was a very thought-provoking answer, my friend. Thank you for that. Listeners, I hope you're paying attention today. This man is creating some value for you. Jeff, we got time for one more question. And I would like to know if you've got a final thought or a final anecdote that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Absolutely. When I think of this great discussion that we've had today, it makes me think. You've asked these thought-provoking questions that have taken me down a trail here with you, and I really appreciate that, number one. So again, thanks for having me aboard today.
It's been my pleasure.
I think the idea that we need to own what we own as a leader first before we can lead is a very fundamental principle. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we don't, we're setting ourselves and our teams up for failure. So we all have areas that we need to improve. We all have strengths. We all have success and failure. And in fact, in my life, I've learned more from failure than I have from success, because without a healthy understanding of how to handle failure, we can't learn, we can't apply what we've learned in the measured and correct way. So I think the final thought would be not to fear failure, but to lean into failure with a healthy mindset and look for the opportunities that failure might bring. And certainly don't do the same thing over again, like to fail twice in the same thing. That's probably not so smart. That's not what I'm saying, but I know our listeners understand that. But right. To learn from those moments, because we're teaching our teams in those moments too, how to handle adversity, how to pivot, how to trust your gut. All those things come from success and failure. And you really can't have true success without enduring the ups and downs, the bumps and bruises along the way.
Amen. I had the wonderful fortune to spend a lot of my career working for some pretty terrific leaders and managers. And one of the very best that I worked with was a gentleman by the name of Phil Soren, who was my CEO at a company called Compellent Technologies a decade or so ago. And the interesting thing about Phil was that he actually branded our culture. He called it positive aggressive culture. And the lesson I learned from Phil time after time after time, he just kept teaching it to me through his unbelievably powerful behavior, was that everybody makes mistakes. We're human. So let's not waste any time pretending to be superhuman. Let's just be the best humans we can be. Let's lean into the learning from our mistakes and pivot as quickly as we can to doing something about them, something positive. Wonderful, wonderful lesson that I learned from Phil. And obviously you've learned the same lesson along the way. And thank you so much for sharing it with our listeners today. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you today. And you've made a really fantastic episode for our What Are You Doing listeners. To say we appreciate your time today just seems like a crass understatement. You're a terrific leader and an amazing developer of leadership for everybody that you're working with as your clients. And we really appreciate you making time today to speak with me and give our listeners an abundance of really fantastic ideas about how to develop themselves as leaders and how to develop their teammates as leaders in the future. Really, really fantastic stuff. Well, that's our episode for today, leaders. We want to thank today's guest, Jeff Rogers, the founder and chief executive officer of Jeffrey A. Rogers Executive Business Coaching in Syracuse, New York. Our next episode will be released in a few weeks, and we'll be introducing you to another great business coach who's making a profound difference in the world of business. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us, and please reach out to us at info@michaelbeachcoach.com if you have a great suggestion for a future guest for a future episode, or perhaps you'd like to become a featured guest yourself. Check out our videos on our YouTube channel if you'd like some additional leadership nuggets between now and our next episode. And we will look forward to that next episode and seeing you all again. Until then, remember, start working today to become the person you've always wanted to become. You do it by investing in yourself and investing in the team around you. Believe in yourself and believe the best about everybody you work with. And we'll see you next time.